In the first video, it was shown how an inexpensive toy quadcopter like this could be made with simple bits and pieces into an amphibious drone. The amphibious drone, which you see here, was tested on the Swan Pond on the local golf course and successfully flew into and out of it several times. After that, it was promised that we would do sea trials in salt water. For the sea trials, we've made a few modifications. The electronics are now surrounded by a hull, which is watertight up to about the level of the quadcopter frame. The idea of this is to make sure that even if it sinks, the seawater will be kept out of the electronics. The hull actually has a lid as well, but it's not totally waterproof. The camera is now enclosed in its own water-resistant housing, which is open at the front but sealed all the way around, because the camera has a number of places where water can get inside, particularly where the memory card is inserted. The floating balls and the flotation brake are still with us, and on the whole, we hope now that even dropping a good distance into salt water, water will be kept out of the electronics. That's how she floats in fresh water. The test now is to see how it handles a drop. Sinks in, but no actual sign of water in the electronics. But no video was obtained in saltwater trials because hard landings caused damage and the water caused corrosion. And the reason is that it does sink and water does get in, and further, that the structure was too flimsy and a stronger design is needed. And so, we now have the Seadrone Mark II. The central fuselage is completely enclosed with a window for the camera, so the electronics are completely isolated from the water. And the pontoons now cover the motors, so they are almost isolated from the water. The pontoons are made of polycarbonate tubes, which were intended for protecting fluorescent tubes. And the fuselage is sandwiched, it's two fuselages from the original drone sandwiched together and held with elastic bands. The Mark II was given the standard duck pond trial, which it failed. The reason was that the duck pond has become rather choked with weeds in the intervening month, and when it was flown into the weeds, the drone tripped over and lay on its back in the water. This situation lasted for about half an hour while the proper equipment was assembled to get it out of the pond. It looked pretty forlorn, but in fact it suffered no ill effects. No water got into the electronics or camera, and no significant water got anywhere near the motors. And so it seemed worthwhile on this basis to skip the freshwater pond and proceed directly to sea trials. The Seadrone testing ground is on the Balenes Islands, where there is a small bay that offers good shelter from the south wind. And best of all, they provide an excellent excuse for spending an afternoon on the water on the Salish Sea. The lab boat was moored in the bay. The drone was charged up. The wind was monitored 1.3 knots with slight gusts. And Seadrone was loaded in the dinghy for the first trial from the beach. That was the first successful landing of any of these drones in salt water. As the drone returns up the beach, a new problem becomes apparent. The heat from the electronics trapped inside the foam fuselages causes the air inside the fuselage to mist out on the window. It's a problem that divers face as well. And we tried the old diver solution of scrubbing toothpaste on the window. The second test was to take off from the water, and here a new problem cropped up. The drone has difficulty in listening to its controller when it's sitting right on the water. The reason for this is not clear. The controller had difficulty locking on and the drone sometimes missed commands, but as soon as it was flying, everything seemed to be fine. The control is at 2.5 gigahertz. Propagation should be the same as over ground, but it doesn't seem to be.
Du ljuva ängel fin, fast du ifrån mig haver gått, är du i hågen min, så tackar jag för kärleken. Jag njutit hårartig, min vän, till denna dag och stund. Jag unnar dig en dag av gott, du ljuva ängel fin, fast du ifrån mig haver gått, är du.
Another problem with flying over water is that distances are difficult to judge, and it's easy to let the drone go too far away so that it can't be controlled. And this happened at this point. It fell toward the water and sat there spinning, unable to be turned off, until the boat with the controller in it was rowed up close enough when it finally did shut down. And just sat there looking smug. Third test was to take off from the deck of the boat. For this test, the wind had blown up to about 6 knots, so it was tricky. The drone has an affinity for the rigging for some reason, and the main difficulty was to avoid flying into the boat itself. At this point, a real rotary wing vehicle turned up and did a couple of circuits of the bay, so we had to wonder why the Coast Guard was investigating our activities. But we found it wasn't the little drone. It was other people who had other problems, trying to get through the small channel between the islands, which you actually cannot do. At this point, the partiers began to show up, and so it was time to collect up the results, go home, and produce this video.